Okay, so this is 10 past 2, and I'm Laurent Schmidt, the Secretary General of ENTSO-E, and I would like to welcome you for the second day of our Vision 2030 week. We're going to speak this morning about TSO, DSO, and flexibility integration into the into the grid system. Once again, we have a very good lineup of speakers today. Thanks a lot for joining. I would like to remind few housekeeping rules. So we are not going to use the chat into GoToWebinar. If you want to raise, please log into Slido. The moderators are going to use the most popular question being raised. Please indicate in Slido your name, company, and institution, and we very welcome through the presentation any question or chat through Slido. Speakers are going to use their video while they speak. Others are going to unmute their video, and all video will be active during the panel session. So this being said, we can now, I think, move to the, you see here the detail to connect onto Slido. We can move to the first step of this webinar, and I would like to introduce today, we are very lucky to have with us Michael Jesberger, who is the CTO of Transnet BV, but into ENTSO-E as well, the chair of the steering group on transmission and distribution interface. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Laurent, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar number 3 on unleashing the potential of flexibilities in the whole network. Today's agenda contains a variety of very interesting presentations, excellent speakers, and a Q&A session in the end. I will guide you now through today's agenda and will present in brief the speakers. At first, we have Damien Cortinas, project leader at ENTSO-E Vision 2030, who will give us an overview of ENTSO-E Vision 2030. Then we have Anne-Sophie Risnes, head of department at Statnett, responsible for development of TSO-DSO interaction and distributed flexibility. She will present future energy system access to distributed flexibilities. At third, Christos Dikaiakos, convener of ENTSO-E Working Group Flexibility and Markets. He will present the role of innovation, identify and scale up best practice. I'm also very happy to welcome Paddy Hayes, who is the co-chair of the TSO platform, who will then present the TSO perspective on the future T&D interface. Sean Lovredo, Energy Policy Officer, BUEC, will afterwards present the consumer's perspective and the role in future electricity grid. And finally, we will have the chance to discuss your submitted questions with all presenters. The moderation will be done by my colleague Robert Popowski. He's the vice chair of ENTSO-E Steering Group Transmission and Distribution Interface. And in the end, I will give a brief conclusion. Let's go to the next slide. What you can see here is the transition in the European energy system, where we are moving from the past, where we have already connected a couple of renewables. In this picture, you can see on the left-hand side the wind farms to the higher voltages, and this will change dramatically. So we will see more and more photovoltaic in the future on the lower voltage levels, also wind parks on the lower voltage levels. And we have also indicated that the consumer behavior is going to change in a way that the sectors will be coupled. This gives us a huge potential of flexibilities, and we, of course, want to make use of them even more in the future. Next one, please. In parallel to the decentralization and electrification, the digitalization may contribute to enabling business cases for new market actors as prosumers' participation to the market. It is also contributing to a transparent data exchange, especially needed for system operators, but also for ensuring transparency against the customer and other roles. Therefore, it requires sufficient measurement for avoiding cyber threats. Next one, please. what you can see here are the joint task forces we have established together with the DSU community, represented today by Paddy Hayes. And we have a couple of work streams which are aligned also with the Commission. So we are working together on a roadmap for cooperation on system planning. We have a team looking at cybersecurity, network code, demand-side flexibility, data interoperability, cooperation framework, and of course, smart grid indicators. So all subjects are related to the future needs of the energy system in Europe. And therefore, we are cooperating very, very closely together with the colleagues from the distribution segments. So far, now I would like to move to Damian, who is giving you an overview of ENTSO-E Vision 2030. Damian is currently project leader at ENTSO-E Vision 2030. He is Europe project director at the Executive Board Office of RTE. And after an initial career in R&D, he joined RTE in 2001, covering various roles, including advisory to the board and senior management roles in customer service, control systems, engineering, maintenance, and system operation, including the position of regional director. So, Damian, thanks, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Miguel. Can you hear me correctly? Just to check. Can you hear me? Yes. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So what I am going to do at the beginning of the webinar is to a quick reminder of the overall vision that we started presenting yesterday morning for those of you who are connected, to show how this flexibilities item or issue fits into the overall vision before we go into the subject of today. So just a reminder, what we have tried to do with this 2030 vision within ENTSO-E is, as we reminded yesterday, we have built what we know a vision that tries to reconcile at the same time the political objectives and the technical reality, based on the 2030 targets, the clean energy package, all the main trends that now are coming into fruition in the European scene. We have built a vision that is based at the same time on the scenarios, that is a shared view of the future from the community of TSOs with all policy holders in Europe. We looked at system operation, we looked at market design, we looked at all the other aspects, and we have built something that we think is a robust and resilient, expert-based vision that can be adapted to a future that will change, but where the main trends all point, we think, into a clear direction today. And this vision is intended to be used as something that will facilitate at the same time the Green Deal and of course the climate laws that are coming into being in Europe in the next few years. Next slide, please. So the main key drivers that we have identified in the vision that we are presenting all through the webinars are reminded here. The first one is distributed flexibilities, and this is the one we are going to talk today. Yeah, I have a reminder of what are the others, and that they will be covered in all the other webinars of this week. The market design that we already covered yesterday afternoon, the power electronics and the innovation challenge that we'll cover tomorrow, and the wind generation and interconnection in the sea, software grids and system integration that we'll cover this afternoon. What we call key drivers is not everything that is going to happen in the next 10 years, but it is the things that will change the most the way we see and operate and manage the power system in Europe in the next 10 years. So these 6 drivers, if we go to the next slide, all come together into what we call a vision of the future that will be a true system of interconnected systems. And the one we are going to talk today, and again, all the other system of systems will be developed in the other webinars, and they will all come together in the final webinar, is the systems of transmission and distribution, and why they will need to work differently between them, among them, in the near future. And with a very clear view in mind that it's particularly important for this part of the vision is that we should always have in mind that we do this for the benefit of all European consumers, and how the European consumer can handle the maximum benefit of what we are doing in the next 10 years. Another way to see it is shown in the next slide. If we can go there, is this system of systems will have 3 main geographical scales, and all 3 will be equally relevant in the future. The national scale is the main scale that we have seen from the very beginning in the building of the European power sector. We have developed already along the way a lot of European tools and local tools. The trends, what they clearly show is that the European level and the local level will reinforce themselves at the same time. All the trends point into this direction. And when we will talk today about flexibilities, we will see how this link between the 3 levels will be one of the keys to unleash all the potential that the flexibilities will open to us in the future as a way to facilitate and to be able to manage the policy goals, and particularly the energy transition in Europe. Again, always with this idea of putting consumers at the heart of what we are doing. So this is just a quick reminder. Again, you saw it yesterday, and you will see it again in the 6th webinar. Now we are going into the flexibilities part, and why flexibilities is going to be a very big deal for the next 10 years, and why this rise of flexibilities will be something that will need us all to change the way we do business in Europe. The first is this graphic that was taken also from the scenarios work that was presented yesterday. It's what we call the rise of renewables. And you see 2 of the scenarios. There are a lot of different scenarios about how this is going to evolve in Europe in the next 30 years, because here we have a target that goes out up to 2050. 2 of the main ones that we are showing here is what is called distributed energy and global ambition. Those are just the names of the scenarios. They all go, as you see, the trend is exactly the same. It's only a question of how quickly are we going into this direction. In both of them, we have between 70, 69 and 82% of distributed energy of renewables, in 2050. And when you look at how 2030 is going to look into this way 2050, we have a share in both scenarios that is higher than 30% of renewables in Europe. And something that is very important is this rise will be very evenly distributed in the different levels of the power system in Europe. And we have interrogated and we have made a survey of all the national communities that we have been able to share to reach through ENTSO-E, is that when you look at it, we see that in all national scenarios, at least half or all the new renewable energy sources will be connected to the European grid, will be connected to the distribution networks. And that is a game changer of what we've seen in the past. There will be small units. In transmission, we have bigger units, but half of new renewables broadly will be connected to the distribution networks. And this is one of the first part on the flexibilities. If we go to the next slide, we can see that generation is only part of the equation, because there will be a lot of other sources of possible distributed flexibilities, and these new sources will all come in the distribution networks. You see here in the graphics the sources regarding the scenarios. In all the cases, you see a big increase, but what we see is that we are going to see a huge increase in the future of storage and batteries connecting distribution networks, of electric and plug-in hybrid passenger vehicles. That could be a real source of flexibilities, as you all know, of heat pumps and hybrid heat pumps, all connected to distribution networks, all potential sources of flexibilities that can be used to better manage the system and also to give value to the consumers that will give them. What this means is that the coordination between TSOs and DSOs in the future is going to be more and more relevant because all the trends again point in the same direction. Huge rise of renewables, batteries, electric vehicles, heat pumps, hybrid heat pumps, and also active consumers that will greatly increase the share of flexibilities that will be connecting distribution networks. This can be shown graphically in the next slide. This is roughly just to give an idea of what will happen in the next 10 years. In the left side, you have what we saw the classical power system, where the flexibility providers, I mean the providers of the tools that is useful to manage the power system, were mainly in supply, supply that was big supply. Mostly a big part will be on the grids, transmission and distribution, a very small part in the demand part. This will even progressively into the future. In 2030, we will certainly see a big increase on the last part of the curve, and it will only increase after that, going through 2050. And you see that the flexibility providers will be distributed all through the system between supply, transmission, distribution, and the final customers. And what does this mean coming into the future? If we go to the next slide, that is the final part of my introduction. What we mean is that with the number, with the share, with the potential of the flexibilities that will be connected in distribution, they will for sure have an impact on the distribution grid, and this is something that the DSOs will have to manage, but they will also have an impact on the system as a whole. And when we see, if you remember the three scales, this amount of flexibility in the network in the future, and 2030 again is going to be a first step that will be significant going through 2050, will impact for sure the national power system, but also the European one at some point. So this gives a whole new light into what we call the meaning of cooperation between transmission and distribution, and the cooperation between the three levels. And the main questions now that comes into it is that these distributed flexibilities, the difference between the flexibilities that were at a big generation and transmission part is that there will be shared a huge number of different actors. And so one of the keys for the future will be how to develop products and services that gives the possibility to consumers and to all the actors to really take advantage of these flexibilities. And what new products, what new services, how to procure them, and in the end, how do we do to maximize value for the customers in the whole system by being able, through cooperation, to use these flexibilities in a way that maximizes again the value for the customers and also for the system. This is how the issue is framed, and now for the rest of the webinar this morning, we are going to see from views from TSOs and also from DSOs that we are very happy to have in the webinar today with us in how this could go in the future and what are the pathways that will allow us to go into it. So that's all for me. Thank you, Michael, and now I give way to the next speaker.
Thank you very much. How to procure and how to maximize value. Interesting questions, especially when you look at your statement that until 2050, 82% renewable energy sources in distributed energy needs to be integrated in the grid. Yeah, thank you very much, Damian, for that overview on ENTSO-E Vision 2030. We now come to Anne. Anne is working for Statnet and is there responsible for the development of TSO-DSO interaction and distributed flexibility. Within ENTSO-E, she has contributed in various projects on T&D interface, including participating in the drafting team for the joint report from ENTSO-E and the DSO organizations on active system management. Anne will give us now an insight into future energy systems, access to distributed flexibility. Anna, please.
Thank you for the introduction, and thanks for the possibility of talking about all this potential these changes to the energy system gives us as system operators. But I'm going to talk about the possibilities, but before I get to the possibilities, we need to start with some of the challenges. I think there's important to understand and how that actually makes us work together and represent some challenges, because all these changes in our energy system, they do something with the physical characteristics, because we're more than a market, we're a physical system, and the balancing will be affected by all the changes going on in the production patterns and consumption With the changing flow patterns, we expect to see more potential overloads of grid assets as transformers and cables and lines. We know that the fast changes will propose a challenge to the reactive flow in the grids. And also when it comes to the less generators with rotating mass, we will also see some challenges when it comes to inertia and the stability of the grid. So basically there are physical challenges, and these physical challenges, they don't respect the different roles or man-made rules. And this is why all system operators need to cooperate in order to get where we're going with this electrical future. So this is why the one system integrated approach is why we work together. And the goal for everybody is to find a way to introduce these new assets and actually value them so that it could be part of solving the challenge. Next slide, please. Because the challenge is also the solution, because all these new distributed resources, they can provide new services to the system operators. But where do we start? And that might be one of the challenge. It might seem that we're moving too slow. I know there's lots of eager business developments and market participants wanting us to move forward, and that's where we're starting. It's important for us then to take these challenges that we see and describe them more in a better way. How do we define our needs? What do we need to solve our operation? And how can we share these needs in a way that new participants and existing market parties can find a business opportunity for providing flexibility? And this product definition cannot be done by the system operators alone. We need to do that in dialogue with the stakeholders, because there is the language we need to translate. Because if we describe all needs the way that we used to do it, it might not be that easy for a stakeholder to understand how this could be translated into their possible business models. So we need to start with finding out what are the challenges, what do we need, and communicate and having a dialogue with the stakeholders on that, so that the rules for the services that we establish are transparent and understandable for the outside world. So the cooperation between the system operators on all levels is key to this process. And one of the reasons is that the same resource may be used for different services and by different system operators. And in this lies an opportunity, because this provides for the flexibility provider to see some value stacking. So if you invest in the technology and gain access to the market, it might be more relevant if you know that there are more system operators that could procure this flexibility from you. So this is why we need to cooperate, and we also need to find market processes and data exchange that at the same time as we provide for market access, we need to ensure the safe operation. And that's why we also need the processes and the data exchange to work. Next slide, please. It might, as we started, the physical system is a big challenge, and also the market rules needs to be done thoroughly. So what kind of process, how should we procure these services in the future? And as probably all of you are aware, there are a lot of different trials and projects all around Europe and the world on how this could be done. This is a more general description on how a process for congestion management might look like. Because this could be done in several ways in the different countries. But this process is meant more like a tool for further discussion and development between the system operators. Because when we started this to talk about how to do this, you sometimes could discuss different angles. Because on some parts of the sub-processes, the main focus will be how to exchange information between the customers, the flexibility service providers, and the system operators through bids, through activation, verification. But on some of these sub-processes, the coordination between the TSO and DSO is vital to ensure the safe operation, and especially on the pre-qualification and the market coordination scheme, there's a lot of work to be done. So how do we procure these services? As I was saying, there are a lot of sub-processes, but one important place to start is the pre-qualification. After you describe the products that you need, you also need a process for finding out whether or not the unit is able to deliver that service that you're asking for and have the system to participate in the market. But the thing is that it's not only the technical characteristics of the units that needs to be checked during a pre-qualification. We also need to make sure that the grid is able to realize the product delivery, because this is how we make sure that a TSO activation of a flexibility asset does not cause problems for the distribution grid, for example. So this would also be an important part of the pre-qualification process development. And that could be done in different ways. It's important that it's also understandable for the flexibility provider. What are the rules? What am I able to deliver? And in the active system management report, we describe two different types. One is the conditional pre-qualification. That might be where you have very stable load patterns, and you know that in the morning it's not possible for you to deliver this service, or perhaps in some periods during the year you would not be able to participate. So that could be described to the unit trying to pre-qualify. The other is the dynamic pre-qualification, taking more into account that the system, the changes, they don't stop, they keep coming, and that it might be possible to reevaluate whether or not the grid is able to handle the product delivery. But the pre-qualification process, there's a lot of work and information exchange to be done between the system operators, making sure that this works. But we need to bear in mind that it has to be user-friendly, trying to standardize it if possible, so that it's easy to understand and easy to access and try to pre-qualify for the participating units. Next. But one of the perhaps most discussed parts of the sub-process is the coordination between the market processes. Until now, I've talked about the system services that could be delivered to the system operators, but we also need to bear in mind, as you see on this slide, there's a wholesale market there as well, where flexibility and in the bids is important for the system and for the market participants. Other than that, this is just some three. You've seen many of these different projects have different description, but these are some main option on how balancing and congestion management could be combined, and it could be combined both balancing and congestion management, or it could have a common congestion market between the TSOC and DSO, or you could have separate markets for balancing, congestion management for transmission, and congestion management for distribution. One of the key elements for trying to understand what are the possible options would be whether or not there are locational information in the bids, and what kind of locational information is currently being used in the balancing market. But That being said, it's important part of the understanding of these models is that their efficiency will differ on the different countries, the different member states, due to the physical characteristics and other parts of the energy system, and for example the supply market, how that is organized. But the main part is that whether no matter what option or solution you try to find, the balancing and congestion management needs to be coordinated if it's going to be both efficient and reliable. Next slide. So then that was a lot about the TSOs and the DSOs and trying to solve these not trivial challenges that we're aiming for. But we're back to the customer now and the demand side, the development of DSR, because it's already increasing. And if you see numbers from different surveys, a lot of European countries are already seeing a lot of it being used for different services. And it's from industry to household level through aggregation. But the thing with the demand side response is that it has lots of values, lots of benefits if it's realized. I've talked a bit about how it could provide system services, active power for congestion and balancing, but demand side response is also important when it comes to other sides of flexibility. Today, the peak demand is important when we plan and invest in our grid. And if demand side response can be used to reduce this peak demand and understand it better, we could also be able to have a more efficient grid investment scheme. And that is also important for the customer, because the customer is not only into having the possibility to participate in the market. They want low bills. They want to make sure that our grid investments are planned and done where it's needed, and that they also have the possibility to influence on that. But the locational information is key when it comes to how we could use the demand side response for different services and through aggregation. But as I was saying earlier, if you have there is a balance here between how much locational information we need and the possibility for the aggregators to optimize and bid in pools to gain enough volume for the bids. So this is something that needs to be further studied in dialogue with the stakeholders, especially the aggregators. And of course, when we purchase services, it will be important that we have data on metering and consumption that we could trust. So the proper metering of consumption is of importance when we develop and use demand side response further. Next. So trying to save some time for the debate later, I'll conclude on the one system approach. We start at there is only one power system. There's only one energy system at large, and if we're going to develop further on the system services and using the flexibility, we need to have the integrated system approach. Both how we value and use this flexibility and how we procure our system services, it affects the different levels. But we need to take into account that sometimes we talk too much perhaps about the complication and the challenges that this new energy system proposes for us, but we need to bear in mind that we need to move forward to serve the customers and societies that expect us to value this flexibility and expect us to look for new opportunities to develop a system in a cost-efficient way. So our perhaps most important partner in this development on reaching this vision is the DSOs, And we see that we want to access the same resources, and how can we work together on that? How can we find solutions that we don't interfere with each other, but rather help each other and perhaps contribute to the possibility for more flexibility providers to see a business opportunity for entering new markets and existing markets. We need to share data, and we need to make sure that everybody, all system operators, have the information and the visibility they need for the secure operations, because in the end, that's key in our mission, the reliable operation. So we have a common vision, and that's a very good start on the one system approach. And at TSOs, we want to work together with the industry, with stakeholders, with the DSO, but also with the new participants that might not be familiar with our markets and our system, but are seeing the possibilities coming. At the same time as we're working together at a European level, we need to understand that the different possible models for national implementation. There's a lot of European diversity in existing markets and systems, and that needs to be taken into account when we develop further. So we should learn from each other, but at the same time bear in mind that there are a lot of national specificities that needs to be looked at when you see what's an efficient system. So the system is integrated both cross-border and vertically, and this is why we work together both at a national level between the system operators, but also European level, with the same goal, which is to value the flexibility in an integrated way in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, for this very refreshing presentation. In the very beginning, you have made as an introductory statement, you're saying changes in our system assumes coordination between voltage levels and markets. And I think that will be very interesting to see how the Green Deal targeting for decarbonized Europe is going to harmonize with the market design and the requirements on the technical side, especially on the congestion management, I would say. How are we going to deal with that one? Do we have enough critical mass on the flexibility side to cope with the grid demands? So interesting subjects, and thank you very much for your presentation and the well-set content. Now we are moving to Christos. He's the convener of ENTSO-E Working Group Flexibility and Markets. He will explain to us the role of innovation, identify and scale up best practices. Christos is head of section planning and management of research and development project in the Research, Technology and Development Department of the Independent Power Transmission Operator in Greece. Previously, he worked at Netcom and Indracom Defense Electronic Systems. Christos, we are happy to have you here, and the word is yours.
Thank you for your kind introduction. So, we all know that distributed flexibility will become a significant source of flexibility for TSOs onwards 2030. When we do know the framework is the clean energy package, because the clean energy package gives access of distributed assets to participate in all electricity market, and DSOs to procure services to resolve issues like congestion management. So what we need is, we do also know that the flexibility platform can facilitate the operation of the flexibility market. And this flexibility platform at least should has some main tasks like the coordination, the procurement of services, dispatch and control, and other supporting services. So under this framework, in the context of Research Innovation Committee of ENTSO-E, we made a large exercise. That means we have scanned thoroughly dozens of R&I projects, national and EU-funded ones, and actually and demonstrations, use cases, large pilot demos. So we mapped all these R&I projects in the flexibility framework and cluster into flexibility solutions. So actually, we have identified 3 large pillars of flexibility solutions, technology-based, where we examine the technology only and not go how we incentivize assets to participate in markets. The market incentives, where we don't, then we are focusing on how we're going to incentivize and how these assets are going to participate in the markets. So most of the research mapped address, as we anticipated, technical solutions like battery storage or market incentive instruments. But how we came up with this flexibility framework? So if you can go to the next slide, please. So here we see how we created general framework for power system flexibility. First of all, we had to answer why flexibility is needed. And as we're expecting, this is to cover power system needs from a system level perspective, of a grid levels perspective, in the sense that we need it for adequacy, for frequency stability, reliability of supply, voltage stability, and congestion management. But what can provide flexibility? So we actually have 3 main categories. We have sources, controllable variable generation. We have demand, large or small loads, electric vehicle, and so on. And we have of course storage, all forms of storage, electrical storage like supercapacitors, classical electrochemical storage like batteries, thermal storage, chemical storage, and so on. So we have the sources, we know what is needed, but how actually can this flexibility can be provided? So we came up with the flexibility instruments, and we identified 5 large categories: market-based, rule-based, agreement-based, price-based, or information-based. So if we go into the next slide, please, we see some statistics on the projects. As we see here the funding schemes and also the engagement of TSOs and DSOs, and in some cases of both TSOs and DSOs, when there was a project that needed a cooperation, coordination between TSOs and DSOs. And if we go to the next slide, we see another result of the scanning. So as anticipated, more all this majority of the NIR projects are focusing on adequacy, frequency balancing, and congestion management for both TSOs and DSOs. And of course, the source examined thoroughly are mostly storage, all kinds of storage, but of course, most of the innovation projects are focusing on battery storage. And the instruments that are used to provide this flexibility are more market-based and less the other instruments, as we have already mentioned. So after doing this mapping of research projects into flexibility solutions under the flexibility framework established, we came up with, we go to the next slide, with some flexibility fact sheets. So what we can see here is that we created actually a table which incorporates on the left side of the slide the available sources and the types of storage and so on. On the top of it, the needs that addressed by the R&I project, and also we have attached the level of maturity of these technology solutions. So this was a mapping only on flexibility solutions on technical ones. And also to see the level, to understand the level of majority, we have attached also the respective TRL level. So we repeated this exercise for the market-based instruments. When we see also that the majority of the R&I projects are focusing on, as we see in the previous slide, on storage coming from batteries, and in this slide, our address are more focusing on creating market platforms. But after having this exercising and having this pool, we wanted as a part of a larger exercise, what was stemming from the steering group transmission distribution interface, to see to what extent the current regulatory framework enables the participation of distribution assets as a flexibility service for flexibility service provisions. And this exercise identified many barriers, 27, I think is the number. And the question was, okay, you do innovation, you have many EU or national funded projects. Can R&I projects are actually address some of these barriers? And the question is yes. So if we go to the next slide, what we can see here is that having this pool of R&I projects, which was scanned thoroughly, then we came up the most relevant with TSO-DSO coordination and energy markets. And as we see here, the majority of R&I projects are developing new congestion management products, both for TSOs and DSOs. Actually, among the projects that are participating in the bridge initiative, almost 90% of these are designing congestion management products. Now, what are the lessons learned after this scan? First of all, of course, as anticipated, there is many differences regarding technical specifications. So we have many differences from project to project. And there is a general discussion and some questions, open questions, in the sense that the products should be standardized and how not, and whether we should left more freedom to flexibility service providers in order to submit their offers, and but they can actually select from a broader range of financial and technical parameters. And also we must have in mind that when design products for congestion management, these should be aligned for the design of project of balancing products, so to avoid any conflicts. Even though, and also moreover, the role of active and reactive power in congestion alleviation should take into account the proper coordination between TSOs and DSOs. So we have many R&I projects that are developing congestion management products, but also we have real life applications. And the most noticeable of them are the coordinate, which we're going to discuss in the next slide, PicoFlex and ERA go-backs interface and so on. So we took one of these projects under the concept of TSO-DSO consumer and the coordinate, and we have scanned it and to see what is their proposal. So here two products are defined. They define one product for congestion management, which is procured at this fixed price. It's capacity based, and we have a second product which is energy price, is procured at an energy price, and a non-reserve product. And we can see here in this table the technical properties and characteristics of these products. Now, coordinates tries the main goal of this project is to produce standardized products for both TSOs and DSOs. And in this context, it develops a separate market congestion, separate congestion market for TSOs and DSOs, but also examines the integration with the existing markets, the intraday, the balancing, and the day ahead. The scalability, usually the scalability of an RI project is applied in the sense that all the products are tested in different markets with different properties. And for instance, the products are tested in Spain, Sweden, and in Greece. Now, I will also try to, if we go to the next slide, we'll see here the innovation of another important project, and let's discuss about the flexibility resources register. So in the ASM report, the Active System Management ENTSO-DSO of ENTSO-E, this actually flexibility resources register is introduced as a vital part of a flexibility market, because it gives the possibility to all the market parties to actually have a visibility to the flexibility resources potential available at all voltage levels. And the concept here is used in many research and development projects, but also implemented in real-time applications, as we have said. And the most noticeable project to the scanning was the recorder in the UK, the Cinegrid, the earlier demo for a blockchain-based solution for residential scale resources, interface, go-backs, and so on. So flexibility resources register actually is combined of many modules, as you can see on the left-hand side, and actually implements the concept which was referring to the active system management of DSO of ENTSO-E. So it uses a communication module, it uses validation, flexibility register, and so on. But also, what we have, what we want to mention here, but also it uses the traffic lights concept. It is a concept that actually prevents conflict when procuring one product to solve a local challenge, like a local congestion management. So this does not have the impact on, for instance, on the DSO and vice versa. So here we have some lessons learned. Of course, we have different functionalities and organizational models, as anticipated. But we do have also new roles. For instance, in this project, the flexibility data manager is introduced, which in cooperation with TSOs and DSOs can actually have the right to perform audit checks or quality checks regarding the data and IC infrastructure for the provision of these services. And if we go to the next slide, we're going to see how this flexibility resources register actually becomes an active and dynamic part of the wholesale electricity markets. Of course, the benefits of these solutions, of the implementation of these concepts are seen here. Of course, we do understand that this developed regional flexibility solution for bio markets, which has an outcome to increase the market liquidity. Also, it uses better coordination, congestion management, and unbalancing, as well as coordination on bid grid qualification. And also the direct activation coordination between TSO, DSO won't cause congestion in the TSO, DSO grid. But of course, as we may understand, and I will conclude here, we still have challenges and open questions. And the challenges are what functions of the flexibility service providers should be attached to the regulated domain, what should be on the commercial domain. What about confidentiality issues, especially with the inclusion of residential customers? And also another issue is the rollout of the update ICT, because it seems that there are no incentives to include new technologies, since these ones are seen sufficient for the provision of these services. And also, what are the rights of obligation that we should assign to the flexibility service provider? But as main outcome, we have seen that RNA projects actually implement real applications and solve many barriers. So that's for me. Thank you very much.
This was a very good example for a very operational and practical approach on R&D. So Christos, thank you very much for that good presentation. Your statement that flexibilities are for power system needs at the very beginning, I think that's also a very strong one, and reminds us that flexibilities are no end in itself. And that we need them in the grid in the future even more as today. And therefore, you have underlined that your topics in your R&D projects have an extremely high relevance. So thank you very much for that one. Now, I would like to hand over to Paddy Hayes. He is the co-chair of the TSO platform in ENTSO. He will show us a DSO perspective on the future T&D interface. Paddy is Managing Director at ESB Networks. Prior to this, he led ESB's generation and wholesale market business. ESB Network is the DSO in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, and working closely with the Irish TSO Airgrid together. They together accommodate an average of 38% renewable electricity on the Irish network over the first 6 months of 2020. Paddy, we are happy that you are here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michael, and yeah, that's perfect. So good morning, everybody, from a cool but very sunny Ireland. I'm really privileged to work with Michael on the European Transmission Distribution Platform, supporting cooperation with ENTSO-E, really on behalf of and working with the 4 DSO associations in Europe. That's Eurelectric, Geoda, SEDEC, and EDSO. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this interesting discussion, and I'll try and bring a distribution system perspective to the debate. So I've got a couple of key messages. My first one is that things are changing very quickly in this space, but I think that Damien already covered that this morning. The second one is that the distribution system is really at the frontier of many expected and probably some unexpected new technologies. Not just new technologies, but new services and new behaviors and new consumption patterns. And there are many different dimensions of this change, but also that the pace of change is rapid and the scale of the change is potentially enormous. I think it's important to emphasize that strong liaison between DSOs and between their customers, between service providers, prosumers, communities at the grid edge, and then critically between distribution and transmission system operators is going to be essential so that we can take advantage of the enormous flexibility offered by the evolving landscape, so that we can better accommodate more renewables on our system, whether those are transmission or distribution connected, and that we can use that clean electricity to increasingly drive carbon out of heat transport in the economy. So by transmission and distribution system operators working closely together, we can maximize the accommodation of renewables and maximize the power of electricity as this primary vector for the clean energy transition. So if I could have the next slide, please. So thinking about this from a distribution perspective for a second, distribution system operators all over Europe take responsibility for managing the integration of volatile and decentralized renewable generation, also increased low carbon demand and flexibility services. It's important to remember, and I think Anna highlighted this in her presentation, that there is a large diversity amongst the DSOs across Europe and many local situations that require specific and bespoke arrangements. But DSOs together are responsible for connecting more than 90% of customers, as you can see there, and all DSOs are evolving technology, evolving systems, and evolving processes to manage the additional complexity and changing power flows. Could I have the next slide, please? And working together is increasingly important. The Clean Energy package calls out the importance of liaison and cooperation at this increasingly complex interface between transmission and distribution. So I was going to say that this is a two-way street between distribution and transmission, but I think having heard from Christos, I think we all know this is far more complicated than a street network. A two-way street would completely understate the complexity and the dynamics and the mutuality of cooperation and collaboration in this really dynamic landscape. But I think the really important aspect here is that we cooperate together. So could I have the next slide, please? Cooperating together is really important. We need to cooperate together, and the TSO, DSOs are working on a report on KPI for smart grids, and they talk to various aspects of cooperation in real-time network operations, cooperation in the operation of planning the networks, in exchanging all the necessary information, and we heard Anna talk about that, cooperation with each other in order to achieve a coordinated access to resources, particularly when those resources are capable of providing solutions for different problems or different challenges that transmission and distribution are trying to address. And I particularly agree with Anne on her point, which is that balancing and congestion management in particular need to be coordinated. So developing compatible systems is going to be really important so that we can unlock and exploit the full potential. And if I could just quote for a second from an active system management report that was jointly developed recently by the TSO, DSOs working together. Just, if you don't mind me quoting for a second, it talks about flexibility, which is the modification of generation injection and or consumption patterns, reaction to an external signal or to provide a service within the energy system. It can only be used efficiently if the right coordination mechanisms are put in place and the appropriate data and information are exchanged between DSOs, TSOs, customers, and market players. And yeah, so that's a quote from the Active System Management Report between TSOs and DSOs. So if I could have the next slide, please. So DSOs understand very well the importance, and we've welcomed the opportunities to work closely with both the Commission and ENTSO-E to develop thoughtful and forward-looking frameworks for the TSO-DSO interface, particularly with regards to data exchange with the TSOs to ensure the efficient interaction with market parties. And we continue to work together. So you can see a number of the reports that have been carried out over the last few years with TSO and DSO working together with the Commission. And we continue to work together. We've got a really strong work program for 2020. And we're sharing gap analyses now on distributed flexibilities, for example, and agreeing on many aspects of that, and then working together where there are different perspectives to try and maximize the agreement and the cooperation and collaboration that we have. Could I have the next slide, please? So Anna has already spoken to this model, but I think it's important to highlight it's just one example, I suppose, of both the complexity and the optionality, but also the importance of the work being carried out by TSOs and DSOs together. In this case, as part of that active system management report, to develop agreement on the parameters for the exchange of information and the cooperation in order to allow the efficient flexibility and while maintaining the stability of both distribution and transmission systems, which is so important. Could I have the next slide, please? And so in conclusion then, things are changing really quickly at the grid edge, and there are many dimensions of that change, and the pace of change is picking up. It's very, very rapid, and also the scale of change, the number of changes is enormous. It's important to point out that distribution system operators right across Europe are evolving rapidly to optimize this opportunity. They're evolving their technologies, their systems, and their processes. There's a really strong foundation of cooperation and collaboration and collaborative work between transmission and distribution. And this is really important because working together on the frameworks for distributed flexibilities will optimize the benefit of distribution connected resources for the whole system, both distribution and transmission, and for all of our customers. And really, in conclusion, my final point is that there is enormous potential here. So it's critical that we work together so that we can harness the potential for the clean energy, this potential to support the clean energy transition. And we can use the increasing renewable electricity to drive the carbon out of transport, heat, and the economy. And that we do that for our customers, for our society, and for our future. So thanks very much. Looking forward to the debate later on, and I'll hand you back to Michael Jesperger. Thanks, Michael.
TSO and DSO, compatible systems approach to unveil the flexibility potential. This was one of your headline in one of the slides, and I think a very good statement, which is describing the essential content of our collaboration. Paddy, this was a high quality contribution as always, so thank you very much for that one.
Thanks, Michael.
the distribution perspective is of utmost importance for us because at the end of the day, transmission and distribution is going to design the European energy system of the future, and therefore we need to cooperate, we need to interact, and we also need to understand each other needs to have a highly reliable grid also in the future, so that the lights will stay on and we all meet the target of decarbonizing Europe according to the Green Deal. So thanks again for your time, Paddy. Now, Sean Lofredo, Energy Policy Officer at BUC, European Consumer Organization, where he focuses on issues connected to the digitalization of the energy sector. Sean has over 6 years of professional experience in Brussels. Prior to BUC, he was a senior consultant in a public affairs consultancy firm where he was advertising companies active in the energy sector. Before that, he was a policy manager in a European trade association representing the interests of companies supplying gas to off-grid customers. He started his Brussels life working for an Italian member of the European Parliament belonging to the S&D group. He will show us now what the consumer's perspective is on their role in future electricity grid. Sean, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Michael, for the introduction, and well, thank you very much also for inviting me to this webinar. It's been like a very interesting debate. Before I start, I would like maybe to pick up on a couple of things that were said before, which I found very interesting. Damian mentioned that what is going to be important is reconciling political objectives and technical reality. Considering that we're asking consumers a lot, they're asking consumers to be flexible. We're asking consumers to produce their own energy. It's going to be important also to reconcile these two things with consumers' expectations or needs. Anne mentioned the importance of speaking a common language, and I want to stress that this is very important when we talk to consumers. Many consumers don't have a PhD in energy engineering, and although they can provide you a meaningful contribution and meaningful feedback, you have to speak their own language if you want to have their feedback. So a couple of words about my organization. BEUC is the European Consumer Organization. We are the umbrella group representing 44 independent national consumer organizations, and our main role is to represent them to the European institutions and defend the interest of European consumers. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of background, moving to the topic. We know that to meet our 2030 and 2050 goals, we are going to need more and more wind and more solar power production. We also know that this means that we will move from a system in which supply follows demand to a system in which demand will increasingly need to follow supply, because you cannot really schedule when the wind is blowing or when the sun is shining. And these might represent an issue, at least today, because demand doesn't necessarily take place at the same time as we have power generation. Next slide, please. So I would just move to more tangible things. So what everyone said before is increasingly important, but it's also important to understand what everything means for consumers. So when we talk about energy for consumers, we're talking about heating and hot water. It represents 2/3 of households' energy consumption, and it's going to be increasingly relevant for the electricity system, because we are moving to a system where we're going to have a more important role for space heating and hot water in the electricity mix. The reason of the peaks is because people, when they wake up in the morning, they want to have a hot shower before they go to work, and when they return home, they will expect their home to be warm. And well, I can tell you that these expectations will not change. Consumers will still want to have a hot shower, will still want to have their homes warm, and they will want to have that at the least possible cost. Next slide. Now, the good news is that this is technically possible because flexible appliances such as, I don't know, smart hot water tanks and smart heat pumps are entering people's homes, and they allow for example, for preheating consumers' homes before to avoid the peaks, or to generate hot water during the night when there is less demand. The other good news is that these can happen without any effort from consumers, because at the end of the day, the process will be automatized. However, for consumers to provide their flexibility, three things will be needed. Well, first, clearly, is remuneration. Consumers will use energy flexibly only if they have an incentive to do so. If they don't have an incentive, they will continue to do what they were doing before. Second thing is control, especially when consumers are relying on automated appliances. They still need to have some control over these appliances. Just to make an example, a consumer might fall sick and might need a warmer temperature in their bedroom, for example, to achieve a sufficient thermal comfort. Consumers should be able to revert the decision of automated appliances in an easy way, and they should not be overly penalized for this. Third thing is protection for consumers' data, so protection of their privacy, but also it's a matter of ensuring cybersecurity, which is important not only for consumers, but also for the electricity grid, because as we know, the electricity grid will only be as secure as its least secure part. And many of our members did some analysis of the security of connected products today, and they still are lacking sufficient cybersecurity standards. Now, when system operators decide to activate flexibilities from consumers, so consumer flexibility, I think that two things need to be taken into account, regardless of whether they decide to establish a dynamic network tariff or whether they decide to procure flexibility on the market. Well, first thing is that you should do that by taking a consumer-centric approach. This means, first of all, assessing the impact on consumers and on the energy system of the approach that is used. Meaning that some consumers will be unable to be flexible because, for example, they live in not well insulated houses, so they cannot really preheat their homes that much. And also, when assessing the impact on the energy system means assessing to what extent the measures that you're planning to implement will be effective. We know that consumers react to price signals, but we also know that sometimes consumers react to price signals in an unexpected way, and that theoretical models cannot really predict. So it's important to have some behavioral insight over what will be the consequence of the implementation of the measure. Second thing, consumers need to be remunerated, especially considering, which is important, especially considering that smart heating appliances, for example, still have a higher price tag compared to non-smart ones. So remuneration levels should be set at a level that allow consumers to quickly recover their initial investments. Third thing, consumers should be allowed to choose whether to provide their flexibility or not. And here I'm connecting to what I said before. Some consumers will not be able to provide their flexibility. So where if you're planning to implement dynamic network tariffs, for example, flat network tariffs for consumers who cannot be flexible should always be available. And final point, it's important to design clear and simple charges. We know that consumers react to price signals, but we also know that overcomplicating things might result in disengaging consumers rather than engaging them. So whenever you design a network tariff, what is key is to design them in a way that is as simple as possible, so that consumers can react to them. Next slide. And then once these measures are implemented, increasing transparency and oversight are needed. First of all, regulators should monitor the impacts on consumers. For example, consumers switching to dynamic network tariffs might not be, what can I say, at least at the beginning, might not know exactly how to react to the price signals. So this may result in higher bills and in higher energy poverty. And regulators should definitely monitor these impacts so that decisions can be taken to address this. Second thing, regulators and system operators should inform consumers of the changes, for example, the changes in the tariffs, and should focus exactly on what is important for them. So how, for example, they should behave to ensure that their bills are as low as possible. Third thing, a regulator should ensure sufficient oversight, enforcement, and consumer protection in all new energy services, including aggregation and energy as service. Fourth point, system operators should share information with regulators and decision makers on the cost of grid reinforcement versus the cost of digitalization to ensure that the debate is well informed. And finally, involve consumer organizations in the decision-making process. We have many years of experience in assessing the impact of products and services on consumers. And we have worked together with ENTSO-E, for example, and provided feedback to their work or to the work of the European Commission. So it is something that we are able and we are willing to do. And final slide. If you don't know exactly who to reach out to, here is a list of our members. Please feel free to reach out to any of them or to ourselves. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Shom, and thanks also that you have given the first slide enough time so that we could all read the name of all your members. That's really an impressive number. Yeah, the system is rapidly changing, and yes, flexibility products should be a fit for customer needs. I think you have reminded us that the consumer should really be the center of our actions, and therefore your presentation has very well reinforced that message. So thank you very much for that one. So thanks to all presentation, to all speakers, and now we will move on to the discussion. Robert is going to moderate that one. Robert Pawłowski is Vice Chair of ENTSO-E Steering Group Transmission and Distribution Interface. Robert has been for more than 20 years experience with PSE, the Polish transmission system operator. Currently, he's the advisor to the board. Previously, for more than a decade, he was responsible for operational planning and real-time operation of Polish power system. Other people would call that system operation, I think. Currently, he's a member of ENTSO-E board, vice chairman of TSC Operational Advisory Board, and member of Baltic CCR Steering Committee. Robert, would you please take over?
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everyone. So, as it was indicated at the very beginning, all the participants are encouraged to ask questions via the Slido tool, which already we can see that there are 28 questions. So I think that we do have some activity there. I believe it will increase in the coming minutes. Those questions come from more than 450 participants, then the number of the participants currently we can see. And I will go through the questions according to the ranking, to the number of likes. I think this is the most democratic way. And so let me start with the question which was the winner in terms of the likes so far. It comes from Gilame from NG, and the question is, how do you define flexibility? Is it focused on providing a service that answers a TSO/DSO needs, or focused on a consumer-centric approach, allowing flexibilities to optimize their value on different markets? We already do have an answer from the audience. It comes from Paul from Statkraft. He suggested that maybe flexibility shall be defined as a characteristic of capacity and means the possibility to use capacity with a few limitations. I think that answer goes in the very good direction, and I believe we have already heard the answer to this question. I think this was done by Paddy, who quoted the part of the active system management report, what the flexibility means, and that we as TSOs and DSOs, we considered flexibility as the ability to change the set point, either of a generator, when we're talking about the distributed flexibilities, then of course talking about distribution generation, or on the customer side, or the storage device. That depends what device we are talking about. But I would like to ask maybe Damian, would you like to add something to those definitions which I quoted already? Damian, could you unmute yourself? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I am now. No, I think you really covered in a very thorough way. Flexibility is a means to an end, as was reminded several times all through the presentations. So flexibility is something that will allow to better handle the power system in Europe in a way that gives value also to the consumer that is providing it, or in the case of consumers, or also to the generators of all the different flexibility providers. There is not probably a pan-European definition today of this, other than what you have said. But for this, the most important thing is not really definition, but the products and the ways and the means that will make them easy to use for the consumers, as Jaume said, and I think this is very important. Of course, consumers are not experts in electricity. It is our job, I would say, as TSOs and DSOs, to make it simple for them so that they can unlock value for them and for us. And this is really the meaning of flexibilities in the end, how to unlock value for the consumer and for the power system. And in this case, the power system is at the same time DSOs, TSOs, and the European system comprised of the TSOs together.
Yeah, thank you, Damian. And I already quoted Paddy on that, so maybe you would like to add something, Paddy? I wonder, Paddy, if you would you like to add something to what I told, because I already quoted your statements from your presentation. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I suppose standing back and looking at it from my perspective, this is really about trying to find a way in which we can match consumers' demand on the one hand, and a different type of generation mix on the other, a generation mix that is less dispatchable and less and is more variable on the other, and trying to make sure that we can get the balance right in the interests of maximizing the efficiency of all of that in the overall interest of the consumer. So I agree with Damon that it is a means to an end, and that end is to accommodating more clean electricity on the grid in a way that allows all customers and all consumers to use that clean electricity to drive carbon out of society. So look, I think that's the really important thing. I think it's a really changing landscape, and then within that we are going to see opportunities for consumers choice for consumers, and the ability, I think, particularly as we look at the opportunities that smart meters give, the opportunity for all electricity customers to play their part in this energy transition as well.
Okay, thank you, Paddy. And we know now the transmission and distribution perspective. Anything to add from the consumer side? Jean, would you like to add something to those definitions quoted?
No, I mean, like, honestly, I'm very happy to I mean, like, to hear feedback from system operators about the fact that I mean, all products should be fit for consumers and should what can I say, meet consumers' expectations. So I mean, like, we are, as I said, I mean, like, the devil is in the detail at the end of the day, because if you're asking consumers to be flexible, you have to clearly tell them what they should do. And yeah, I mean, like, clearly happy to to provide you our feedback, I mean, anytime you need.
Okay, thank you. Thank you also to Jean-Lemay for this question, because this is very good question at the very beginning of the discussion, to make sure that we are discussing the same thing, that we understand the same flexibility in the same things. Moving to the second question, which comes from Paul and from Statkraft. Paul recognizes that flex capacity can be used on the market, which includes balancing or for the congestion management. If the owner of the flexibility maximize the revenues, he may be incentivized to withhold capacity from the market to earn more from congestion management. Could that be a remit violation? That's the question, and we do have also additional question coming from the anonymous participant. It's saying that gaming the market must be counteracted with the market surveillance. However, without sufficient transparency, there can be sufficient surveillance. So I would like to comment on this question. I'd like to comment on this very question, as this is very much linked to the different schemes of balancing and congestion management, let's say, interaction, which you have described in your presentation. And please.
Well, thank you for this question, which actually shows how much more of the complexity that we have not solved yet, because basically you're right in one of the core issues that we haven't been able to answer completely. So we don't have an answer to this question, and this is one of the reasons in this joint active system management report, the issue with gaming and capacity payments and balancing congestion is only addressed as further work. So I think it's, as the other question is, said, that there are we do have a lot of competition rules, and we do have a lot of fiscal rules, and we develop this. We need to make sure that these are taking into account. But I don't have a easy answer other than this is work in progress, and just shows why we do have some issues to be dealt with before we can scale all these trials that Christos have talked about, which is going on all over Europe.
Thank you, Anne. I think it's worthwhile to recognize at this point that there are some market models and arrangements in which the balancing is integrated with congestion management, and those these kinds of the market models help a lot to let's say avoid the situations when the generators or whoever who can provide flexibility can withhold its capacity. So I think this is worthwhile to consider those market models, and they are really also examples of also in Europe, those applying of those market models in Europe when you have balancing integrated with the congestion management. And maybe any of the comments from the other speakers regarding this question or this topic in general? If not, then I would move to the question from Ingrid from Powerhouse, which really is very close to the previous one. That one refers to the transparency and how transparent should TSOs and DSOs be in providing geographical components and information to other market participants. Currently, information is often kept hidden due to privacy thinking. And we do have also 2 replies already from the audience. That's one. This is, I understand, clarification of this question from Ingrid's side. That is, which assets are located in the problem area? Where is the exact problem area, etc. How large is the problem? Where and when? And we have also a comment from Gilles to that. Plus publication information and different time horizons. Obviously, they long term they had intraday and real time, and not only ex post, for example. So that's very much linked to the previous question. Another aspect of that, and Christos, could you please comment on that? Taking into account the experiences in all those projects, which are pilot projects, which are currently in application around Europe.
That's thank you for a very interesting question. Actually, this is in general the matter of transparency is something, and actually the discrete roles are and the responsibilities are something that also under research and mostly in EU funded Horizon 2020 projects. In general, the assets are not named specifically explicitly because there are privacy matters, as mentioned before. Some of our projects use code names and not explicitly photograph which asset is connected where. So they use this way, but this is just a research activity. But usually this is proposed in order not to actually photograph the exact asset at the exact location. But you have in general a generic description of the asset, perhaps using the installed capacity. But still is an open question. And also, as I said, since we have flexibility service providers like balance service providers, it's not clear what are the rights and obligation still of a flexibility service provider. So we must first clarify what are the rights and obligations, and then to proceed with more details like the exact assets and in the exact geographical location. My apologies. But
thank you, Christos. Yeah. Thank you, Christos, for that. I think we also need to mention that obviously transparency on the market is a key, but on the other hand, there are some limitations, and especially when we deal with the critical infrastructure, obviously the not all the information shall be made available to the general public for the reasons to avoid issues with that, and that is very much that is really critical issue on the transmission level. And I believe that looks the same from the distribution side. Paddy, can you comment on that?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I think it's a really interesting question. You can look at it from a couple of different perspectives. So I think from the perspective of the system generally, transparency is as much transparency as possible is important because it gives visibility to potential service providers for the future who might want to make an investment to be able to provide services to relieve congestion or to provide different balancing supports in the future in a particular area. So some transparency in that area is very good and very helpful. So and clearly then there are rules about market rules around transparency as well. Equally, I can understand that services being provided in the future by aggregators and just the detail that sits behind the aggregator and individual consumers working with the electricity system may be nervous about that being something that's very open and very disclosed. So I think there are different balancing of different rights and considerations here, but in general, I think from a system perspective, the more transparency there is, the better, because it allows for different sources of solutions and services to be provided in different ways. And I think that's quite important. And I think, you know, in the future, we're going to see different types of services, less flexibility services, but for example, non-wire solutions in the future, when a distribution system operator is thinking about making a reinforcement in a particular area, they can offer that to the system services market to see whether there's a non-wire solution to that in some way. And again, the transparency around that, I think, is going to be quite important in order to generate good competition and the evolution of these sort of services.
Thank you, Pede. And last but not least, Jean, I would like to ask you for the perspective of the consumers on that topic, because here we have this disclosing all the information can touch even the private life of the individual customers, because for example, you can imagine that this can lead to the situation when others know when this customer which you described when he takes the shower, you know, what time in the morning and what time in the evening he shows TV. If all the details would be then available to the others. And could you please comment from that side and from that perspective?
Yes, sure. And yeah, very interesting question and very good question. Yes, you're right. I would also like to add another, what can I say, add another example. In theory, I mean, like, you know, Thief could access this data and know exactly when I'm not at home and come and steal all my belongings. Not that I have many, but still, like, you know, that would be very unfortunate. So, so yeah, I mean, like, you know, it's important to draw the line at the right point. And well, luckily we have something that like, you know, helps us to understand where this line should be, which is the GDPR. So I mean, like, you know, clearly, I mean, like, you know, there is a need for energy sector rules on these, but I mean, like, you know, the GDPR provides sufficient guidance to develop these rules.
Okay, thank you for that. So summarizing, we can say that transparency, of course, is a key and crucial in the market conditions. But on the other hand, we do have the limitations coming both from the critical infrastructure issues as well as from the basically the taking care of the private information of the individual customers. So that needs to be taken into account. Okay, moving to the next question. I can see that there is a dynamic situation because people are voting. So we have. So I would like to make sure that I take another one which is relevant. Yeah, that comes from Jan. The question is, how do you see the role of TSOs in providing infrastructure/platform, IT, standardization, etc., for unlocking the potential of small-scale flexibility in the midst of all the many bottom-up projects already underway? We do have already 3 reactions from the audience, and there is a related question: what about the member states' internal retail market models, that is supplier-centric and customer-centric and associated power market hubs? Will that have an impact on efficient demand response flexibility? And another one from Ingrid. I recognize this question: what is the role of the TSO DSOs and what is the role of the market in coming up with the new commercial solutions? And I would like Christos to
Yes.
start replying to this question as this number of projects was mentioned and you described them
Exactly.
in short. Yeah.
So this is a very nice question. So for our R&I experience, what we have seen is that actually a flexibility platform what many RNI projects look at is the integration with the existing IT infrastructure and systems. And we have RNI projects like GoBax that actually this has done in real life. So they have incorporated a flexibility platform in the market mechanism already installed. So it's not that a TSO should develop a flexibility platform. I think the flexibility platform, we are focusing on the integration. So it means that the TSO should upgrade their ICT infrastructure. There's another matter. This should be done, in my point of view. I'm not the whole TSOs, but actually what RNI projects examine is how we can actually integrate, be a part of the existing system. It's not designing a new one from scratch. This is my experience so far.
Thank you, Christos. Any other contributions from other speakers regarding this issue?
I think the platform discussion is really important, but it's also it could take very many different flavors, the platform discussion, because obviously we need digital tools for all the parts of the sub-process, both when it comes to the coordination between the TSOs and DSO for operation and market, but also when it comes to the communication with the flexibility providers. So you see different platforms and IT solutions being tested on Europe that we need to recognize that some of these platforms will serve then the regulated domain, being a tool for the system operators performing the tasks, and some might be more in the commercial domain. And this is also important when we work forward, because there will be different solutions, and there's also a comment on standardization in here. And I think that's the word we use the least in this debate until now, because the standardization at the European level of both ICT and other issues will be very important to make sure that it fits together in the end, because I don't think we will start with like the big solution solving everything, but we will have the bits and pieces and at different levels, different nationalities coming together in the end. So let's focus on the standardization also on going forward on working on platforms and ICT communication.
Thank you, Anne, for this contribution. I think it's important to recognize that we are more or less in the beginning of this long process of the transformation from the old style power systems to the new completely decentralized power systems, and there's a lot to do in front of us. And I think it's good to try different solutions and then pick up the best ones, especially here in Europe, because we have I am always repeating that Europe is rich in diversity, so we should basically use all the benefits of that and pick up then the best solutions for the future. Okay, let us move to the next question, which comes from Petteri from Finnish Energy, and the question is why European TSOs have very different pre-qualification processes and requirements for balanced service providers. This is a burden, especially when aggregating resources. So maybe we can combine this question with the next one, which comes from Ingrid from Powerhouse. Are TSOs and DSOs thinking about simplifying the pre-qualification process, especially when you want to unlock the flexibility at consumers, that means households? This becomes important. We do have also a comment from audience, which comes from Petteri. Yeah, so I have just did it. I just combined this question, both questions. So maybe first, if because this pre-qualification mainly refers to the operation of the distribution grid. Paddy, could you please start answering that question, and then I will move to the representatives of the TSOs.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I might just go back to something that you talked about on the previous discussion, which is that I think this is the start. Well, we're way down what's quite a long road, and I'm not sure whether certainly for me, whether I've got full visibility of the end of the road. And I also think that this is going to be a collaborative, cooperative journey involving many actors, not just TSOs, DSOs, and not only prosumers and active energy customers, but also community groups, technology providers, aggregators, service providers. So I do think that this overall is going to be an evolution. I like what Anne said about some level of compatibility, but in this overall journey, I think there's going to be quite democratic and evolutionary, and the challenge here is to put a thoughtful framework around this that doesn't in some way constrain the evolution and the innovation on the one hand, but equally allows hopefully this all to come together in a more structured way as things have developed further down the road. And I think the questions around aspects like pre-qualification, or indeed many other aspects of distributed flexibility, it's worth thinking about them in the context of that longer journey. And I think there'll be a lot of evolution in many parts of this area of distributed flexibility, and how the markets work, how it interacts with the systems, and how it all joins together as we go forward into the future. And we've got to be trying things, seeing if they work, great, let's build on them. If they don't work for this, maybe they'll work for something else. But I do think it's going to be a messy, democratic, collaborative coalition of a journey, rather than something strictly linear and sort of engineering-like in let's say building a transmission or distribution line. It's going to be a really different journey for us.
Thank you, Paddy. And Anne, could you please comment on that from the transmission side?
Yeah, I could also, because on some of these flexibility services, we don't see the pre-qualification quite yet, and that's where the democratic development will continue. But at the same time, I'm also reading this question as a comment to the current pre-qualification process, because we do in our already existing balancing market have work going on establishing like the European codes in the different countries. And because there are two very relevant codes, and that's the balancing code and the system operation code, and that laying down rules both when it comes to products and when it comes to pre-qualification. And the aim of that is trying to make it more easier access for the flexibility asset. But at the same time, we need to understand that it comes from a history and markets and systems that are used to dealing in a certain way. So I would say that this is really relevant for the codes that are all being implemented right now, even though we cannot see like the one pre-qualifying platform for European at the moment. I don't think so.
Okay, thank you, Anne. And I would like to move to the next question, which will be the last one due to the timing, because I would like also to give some time for all the speakers to give us a final, let's say, word. But before that, let us take this last question, which comes from Paul from Statkraft. The focus seems to be on a short-term flexibility, but from the market, as from grid perspective, the longer terms seems important. Will that be added to the analysis? I believe that we have not everything what was presented was not only limited to the short-term issues, but we do perceive flexibility in the distributed flexibility, especially as also the option for the avoiding the investments into the grid, especially in the distribution grid. But that's my understanding. But Paddy, could you please comment on that? If I am right in that thinking?
Yes, Robert. I think it's going to be very important as we're looking at the future. Certainly, we're looking at situations in which we how can we preempt or postpone larger capital investments if there are services, system services available to, in an efficient and cost-effective way, obviate the need for that or push out the need for that investment. I think the direction of the question, though, is really important. This has got to be about the long term. So this has got to be about accommodating huge levels of renewables on the system, and how can that be done? How can the system accommodate that? And all of the actors, whether it be generators, transmission, distribution systems, system operators, customers, prosumers, storage providers, working together to basically decarbonize the electricity system and meet the transition to the clean energy future. And that's got to be the long-term objective. In terms of getting there, I think there are going to be many short-term steps as we all work out how to get to that end goal in the most efficient way.
Thank you, Paddy. And Damian, could you please, do you have anything to add regarding this question? And then maybe if you can also start, let's say, the final words from your side.
Yes, thank you, Robert. The only thing to add is that this is going to be quite a challenge. The link between the short term and the long term with a lot of flexibilities. As Paddy just has said, the most important thing will be how to accommodate renewables. How to forecast what renewables are going to be when you're talking about long term, for this winter, for the next summer, for the next 10 years, for investment. Is how do you forecast how these renewables are going to react in the future? And for this, we are starting to have a lot of tools that are common with distribution in order to do it. And one of the main challenges will be how to forecast the consumer part of the equation, because as Jaume said, what the consumer wants to take his shower in the morning, but probably he will also want to take a shower every morning for the next 10 years. But there are a lot of things that we cannot ask for individual consumers to predict for the future, because this is not how they are. And we are all consumers also in the end, even if we are engineers here. And this will be one of the challenges, how to the flexibilities that come from consumer can be used to forecast and for planning and for long-term planning. And probably part of the solution will come from the laws of big numbers and the innovation products that Christos was talking about. So, but again, this is something that's going to be important for the future. And this gives me the link maybe to my concluding remarks that we really are entering a new era on the way we work together to manage the power system. And I think I'm very happy about the way this webinar has been set up, because it is really a foretaste, a foretaste of how these things are going to come with transmission, with distribution. I'm very happy to have Paddy with us, working together with the consumers at the center of what we're trying to do in order how to unlock the value and the possibilities that will allow us, will facilitate the energy transition in Europe. And this is really the main goal, why we are doing all this for the next 10 years, but also for the next 30, because as you know, now we're trying to look beyond that. So thank you all for that.
Even the longer perspective. Yeah, thank you, Damian, for that. Final word from Jaume?
Yes, well, it's just an invite. So let's build the future energy system together. Let's cooperate as much as possible. Let's ensure that consumers still have affordable energy. Let's ensure that consumers are able to, what can I say, to control automated appliances and automated products. Let's ensure that consumers' privacy and data will be protected, and let's ensure that consumers can still take a shower early in the morning for the following 10 or 50 or 100 years.
Okay, thank you. And just 30 seconds to N, Christos, and then Paddy. Starting with N. Concluding remark from your side, if any. There is no need.
Thank you for this debate today and the presentation, but we only scratched like parts of the discussion. And when we come into the questions here in the end, we see that there's a toolbox when it comes to the short term and the long term, and we need to take into account it's not just the flexibility that the system operators use actively, but there's also the incentive sides when it comes to being the customers reacting to tariffs, reacting to prices in the wholesale market. So the complexity of this development is just too huge that no one has the answer by themselves. So I'm just very happy about the general cooperation attitude in the discussions today. So thank you.
Thank you. Christos?
Thank you for the excellent debate here as well. And I want to add something that I think innovation is one way to find practical solutions to unlock the flexibility, because we have the assets. So flexibility means how we will be able to unlock. And we have R&I projects that actually propose some solutions and practical ones. And I think if we also look at the digital equation of cybersecurity and interoperability, we can actually be able to deliver this distributed flexibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Christos. And Paddy, would you like to have something to add?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Just to say, and I think we can see from the last couple of hours, this is a really exciting time to be in the electricity space, and particularly as a distribution system operator, it's a really exciting time. So, and I know from Geode, SEDEC, Eurelectric, and EDSO together, I think the members of those organizations connect, I think 90%, maybe over 90% of the electricity customers through Europe. And this journey now, as we develop the capability for exploiting the distributed flexibilities, is going to be really essential as we link with those customers and the actors at the edge of the grid on the one side, and then we link really critically with the transmission system operators also to provide some sort of coalition where we're collectively trying to exploit the distributed flexibilities so that we can use more renewable electricity, and especially then use that clean electricity to drive carbon out of heat transport, economy and the society across Europe. It's a really exciting time. It's only going to happen if we work together.
Thank you very much for this nice discussion, and I will now pass the screen to Michael for the final thanks to everyone, I believe. Michael, please, the screen is yours. So this is Robert Beck. I have just got a message from Michael that he was not able to reconnect after technical problems he encountered. So I hope I can be heard by everyone. So on behalf of Michael, I would like to thanks to all the speakers for their contributions and also involvement in the discussions. Also thanks to all the participants and especially those who have been active asking questions and commenting questions. So for your information, all the slides presented during this session, as well as the recording of this very session, will be available on the ENTSO-E webpage afterwards for the later usage. And let me at this time thank you once again for participating, and I will pass the screen to Lauren for the final remarks regarding the next sections. Lauren.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Thank you, Michael, for your excellent steering of the discussion. So I think this session allowed to really bring the consumer view into our Vision 2030, which was really interesting. I would just like to thank all of you for participating once again and advertise the session which we will have this afternoon, which will be around energy system integration. What do we mean exactly by energy system integration? As you know, it is a very important element of the Green Deal, as well as a session, as well as touching the topic of offshore development and how to accelerate offshore grids in the future. So thank you to everyone, and I see Michael back. So maybe Michael, you want to say a few words?
Yeah. First of all, apologize for being disconnected, and I also wanted the sequence was planned differently so that I start and Laurent will then close the session. I would like to thank all panelists, all participants from the audience, and all those who have addressed the good questions. Yeah, we have learned a lot about ENTSO-E Vision 2030, future energy system, access to distributed flexibility, the role of innovation, DSO perspective. So for me, I have to say that time was running, and that's always a good sign. Thank you very much also to Laurent and his team for the good organization, for the professional setup. And special thanks to Christian Radl and Robert Paprocki, who have supported very much. So, Laurent, apologize for having the last word. I wish everybody a good day and all the best. Thank you and goodbye.